So I'm getting a knee piece done. I'm in Arizona. I'm getting a tattoo done.
I've heard of having a side piece. A knee piece is new to me.
Okay, I'm done now. that was enough, Joel, for today. um, so I'm getting my knee piece done, and my tattoo artist is talking about how her friend was in a polyamorous relationship, and it was like a open polyamorous relationship. So she had like partners and stuff, but then it was like fully open, so she could just like have sex with whoever she wanted. And so she's talking about it. She's like, I was doing this knee piece or like this back piece or whatever. I'm not gonna give too much information or give away my tattoo artist's name or anything because I feel like that'd be kind of obvious at this point. And apparently she like nicked herself with the needle, and right as she did that, the girl that she was tattooing was opening up an email about how she had chlamydia, like she had contracted chlamydia, and she nicks herself with this girl's needle and contracts the same chlamydia. And apparently she was getting all of the symptoms. And I was like, that's really weird because usually chlamydia is like silent. And she's like, I think it was because it was in my bloodstream. But they never talk about that when you're getting like your tattoo license. Like we talked extensively about the fact that they talk about hepatitis and they
Mm-hmm.
talk about HIV, but they never talk about chlamydia, like nicking yourself and getting like gonorrhea or chlamydia or something.
I'm picturing someone who's going out and sleeping around behind their partner's back and decides to go get a tattoo just to use this excuse. And they're like, I got a tattoo and got chlamydia. Oh man, what a surprise.
But that was like just like the weirdest thing I've like the weirdest way I've ever heard of someone getting chlamydia. Like some people are like, "Oh, if you like rub your vacucci all over a toilet seat, you'll get it." And it's like, "No, babe, that's not how you get chlamydia."
Naomi, I can tell your 4 years of foreign language instruction in high school really paid off. You throwing out the elaborate vocabulary with Facucci. Facucci sounds like either like an Italian sports car or like a really tasty Italian snack, like you find in like bright packaging and has
I
like a
would say
cartoon
snack.
mascot. Yeah.
I would say snack more than sports car.
Yeah. You know what else is a snack? My knee piece.
Hmm. Stop.
I think that's something. That's kind of an intro. I hope people aren't coming to us for like good intros. We're trying to like set a tone, but like we're not good at a good tone. We're just setting a generic. It's kind of like room temperature water. Like it gets the job done, but you're really wanting a little bit more. But it's here for you. I don't know where I'm going with this. Welcome back to Why Will No One Date These Guys. It's a podcast where we set the tone. Room temperature, tepid water. I'm Joel Guy.
I'm Naomi Guy, and welcome to the shit show.
We used to discuss all sorts of things, and now it's just one book. Naomi, we are going to get in chapter 6. I'm going to try a drink before we do that. And while I'm trying that drink, can you remember anything about chapter 6 that we've discussed over the last 5 episodes?
Joel, that was so fucking long ago that we talked about that.
I don't even remember when we started this. It could have been like May or April. It's been a while.
It was a very long time ago. Um, let's see.
Well, while you do that, I am trying Romano's Italian soda. That's right. Ray Romano has an Italian soda. He wasn't content with the residuals from Everyone Hates Raymond. He decided to branch out. It was, I think, a good choice.
Is this actually true or are you pulling that out of your butt? I can't tell right now. I'm really tired.
I'll never say.
How was it?
It's fine. No, it's good. It tastes very strongly of peach. It does kind of lean towards almost a sparkling water with peach flavoring vibe. There's a lot more water taste in the soda, if you know what I mean. It's not like pure unadulterated peach. It's like a peach that got soaked in something. Um,
Okay.
it's refreshing. I'd buy it again. No complaints. Good work, Ray Romano.
Okay. The same producer that produced Everybody Loves Raymond does a show called he hosts a show called Somebody Feed Phil, and he's this like older Jewish man, and he like travels from country to country, and he's like so happy, and I just aspire to be him when I grow up.
We talked a little bit about Joseph Gordon-Levitt in our like episode on porn and how he like
Yeah.
wrote a movie where he gets to make out with both Scarlett Johansson and have sex with Julianne Moore. And I kind of feel as a
Mhm.
Hollywood producer, like your end goal is not to become incredibly wealthy. It's just to create scripts starring you where you get to do whatever your dreams are. And in this case, someone like made
Yeah.
$1 trillion writing Everybody Loves Raymond, and
I
then
love
now
Raymond.
gets to just eat food on the dime of the networks and talk about it. It's such a dream. It's
Yeah,
great.
because it's a Netflix show, and it ran for at least 4 seasons. He might even have a fifth, but now he has like a book, and he's like touring everywhere. He went to like in each episode he goes to either like a different country, and like he'll go to different states and around the United States. It just like that's obviously a little bit less like he portrays the United States a lot less, but he'll go to different parts of the world and do that, and it's so cool. And he always has like a fun little tour guide too. So
That's very sweet. You know what's not sweet? This
yeah,
book. And I want to get back to this book,
yeah, it
Naomi.
sucks. Oh
Chapter
God,
6,
why?
talking all about how women haven't upheld their end of the old contract. We've dispelled pretty much everything. He spent a lot of time last chapter talking about how like society gives women preference in every single way. And then I was like, well, actually, there's a lot of cultures where pregnant women don't get to eat because their husbands don't bother feeding them. And then he's like, well, the government has a major incentive to like keep women in debt, and women keep voting for Democrats because like they have so much debt. And then I pulled the stats, and it was like actually men on average have significantly more debt than women. So he's kind of at the point where he had to make a word count, and he just kept saying things. And this is also the point where
I
he
don't think
stopped
he
putting
even
in
hit that
evidence.
word count though.
I mean, he got to 86 pages,
I don't.
Naomi, and then he added in the end, and then he added multiple pages where he's just talking about himself and other books you should read. I don't know.
Yeah, but at the same time, isn't this book like double spaced and like the
Mm-hmm.
size like that a grandpa could read if they were blind?
Yeah. The writer Aaron Clary, I don't think has a college degree, and that's one of those things like college classes are pretty strict about. They're like, yeah, we've seen it all before. You're gonna format the book in this manner. It's gonna be double spaced, no more, no less. It's gonna have 1 inch margins. I could run it through a program to see if you've like filled the paper with white text that I can't see just to make the word count.
I'm gonna be honest with you. My English class didn't teach me that. My lab classes,
Uh,
my bio lab classes taught me that. My English classes never grammar checked me, which was very odd.
Yeah, and I'm not saying again that you need to go to college to be a smart, successful, competent person. I'm just saying that like people who have gone to college definitely can see through the veneer of credibility he's attempted to build. But with that, let us jump back in right where we left off and talk about the media. Then there is the media, Naomi. Mercy. The media makes hundreds of billions in profit selling all of this to women. The lifestyle, the politics, the empowerment, the materialism, the status, and the handbags. Convincing women that they're anything but debt enslaved people, tax slaves, and corporate slaves as they work 60 hours a week in some soul sucking corporate job to barely pay rent, while the employer joyfully offers to freeze their dried out eggs at 36. When you add it up, over $10 trillion a year in the United States alone is at stake regarding the difference between women living a traditional life versus a modern one. For reference, the United States GDP is about 25 trillion a year. The U.S. media market is about $660 billion. So I don't know where he's getting the 10 trillion, but boy, this seems like a real good make work project if we were to get rid of all the ways the media is influencing us. And so society, through these various institutions, must convince women that traditionalism is bad and that there is a much better life for them. And when boiled down, that life philosophy is composed of 3 parts. First, you don't need men. Second, you deserve everything. And three, if you don't get it, it's men's fault. Naomi, is this what you were taught in schools?
So I need to go back to the part where he was talking about how women slave for 60 hours a week, when literally at the beginning of the book he was talking about how women work way less than men, and that's why they deserve so much less because they can't like actually survive on their own and blah blah blah.
Well, men work 100 hours a week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
thinking
You're
almost
right.
like it's like how a lot of CEOs say they work like 60 to 80 hours a week, but when you dig into how they count their time, it's like I spent 6 hours on the green with Bill talking business, and I spent 10 hours going to bars and talking business, and I spent 10 hours
I
going
spent
to
4
sleep and talking to
hours
business. Yeah,
I spent 4 hours commuting to the business, and on my way, I had a nice long coffee with my grandma.
I spent 4 hours in the
But I was on
toilet
my way to work.
talking business. Yeah, I mean, CEOs want to pretend that they're well compensated for the work that they do, and unfortunately, when you dig into what they actually do, it doesn't add up. So regarding the first part, you don't need men. He has conceded several times that this is an option that a lot of women are taking. He's made it clear that like women have the same right to do this, and it wouldn't be so much of a problem if women weren't like shirking their duties to society. So I don't know how big of a deal this is. Second, you deserve everything. We've talked about this several times. He's never proven that women have more unrealistic standards than men and never responded to the mild problem to his argument that women continue to date men who aren't perfect, attractive tens. Refer to, I think, as either a second or third episode where we talk about how women more consistently message men who are rated like fives or sixes on dating apps than men message women who are moderate, medium attractiveness on some arbitrary attractiveness scale. And then third, if you don't get it, it's men's fault. In episode 8, we spoke specifically about how men are the reason women don't succeed in specific career fields. Men don't like it and when women intrude upon their sacred spaces and so sexually harass them and make their lives completely miserable in order to prevent them from continuing to work in specific fields. And that is the big reason that women leave certain occupations, is because men make their lives miserable because they don't want to work alongside them. So there might be some truth to the idea that like if women aren't successful, there may be a man somewhere who was responsible for that. He goes on and says, "This is a lie. I can write another book about how society lies to women. The most
Please
pernicious."
don't. Please don't.
Oh, he's working on one, I'm sure. The most pernicious lie is perhaps the most luxurious one, and that lie is that women are not responsible for anything. Historically, men have lied to women in this way to curry favor with them to fuck them, but nothing is on the scale of what we do today. We tell women their sociology degree should earn just as much as a man's chemical engineering degree. We tell them that their children have mental issues because of ADHD, not their neglect. Um, Full stop here. ADHD is a very real thing. 3 to 13% of youth probably have some form of it. So it's not that like people with ADHD are bad or that's an invented thing. It's that they don't do so well in rigorous educational environments, and there needs to be some reevaluation of how schooling works at some point. That's like more mindful of cognitive differences. I really like how we just started stating that women are actively neglecting their kids. I guess by going to work. I think there's plenty of examples of stay-at-home parents abusing their kids or neglecting their kids, but I guess going to work to support them and try to give them a good life is also equally bad. It sure would be smart to bring in some neglect or abuse stats, but I think the reason he doesn't do this is both because he's lazy and wants to wrap up the book, but also because he'd have to engage with the abuse neglect perpetuated by men, and I think that's a whole area he just
Mm,
doesn't want to talk about. Um, just a
yeah.
point of order to close out on, I don't think putting your kids in school is neglect. I think not engaging with their education at all is. So like there's ways of educating your kids. If your kids go to like school, maybe sit down with them and do homework with them, help them with assignments, proofread their material, help them get good grades. I'm not saying every parent can do this, but like if you want your kid to get a good education, you should probably at bare minimum like interact with your kid on occasion, unless you just really hate your kids and don't want to interact with them. Which I mean,
You crazy. Why would
yeah,
I want to interact with them? I already popped him out.
right. Because kids are kind of like handbags, Naomi. You just kind of collect them, you put them up in your
Yeah.
closet. Um, you have to water and feed them once a month, just like normal handbags. Yeah, you got to wax them if
Yeah.
they're leather so they don't crack. I think this is true. There's a
Wax
lot of
them.
there's a lot of overlaps between raising children and taking care of fancy handbags. He goes on, we even tell women that big is beautiful. Society lies to women in every capacity and regard, so they have the luxury of not feeling bad or guilty and having no responsibility for their bad decisions, just as long as you buy our shit or give us your vote. Unfortunately, sparing women's feelings, for whatever ulterior motive, doesn't change reality. And when their lives do not live up to the hype society promised, they rightly get pissed. They were supposed to make as much as men. They were supposed to be in positions of power. They were supposed to have a Democrat voting Jason Momoa looking husband who ate organic and rubbed their feet. They were not supposed to be a 38-year-old debt ridden spinster with $250,000 in student loans. The actual stats say it's more like 36,000, making $18 an hour at her assistant social working gig while seriously contemplating her landlord's offer of a blowjob instead of rent. Instead, she was promised she'd have it all. Unfortunately, because there's only two sexes, there is only one group of people to blame for these women's failed lives: men. I'm not sure if he's like not engaging with like discourse surrounding there being multiple sexes, um, or he's just trying to simplify the argument because if there's multiple sexes, it makes it much harder for this argument to hold any water. I don't think women
I
are
think
like
it's a mixture
non-binary
of both.
people are the reasons that. Yeah,
I think it's definitely a mixture of both because I definitely know that like all of the the red pill shit people are always like, "Oh, there's like only two sexes and like if you're non-binary, you don't exist in my world." And like all that shit. So, yeah, I would think it's a little bit of both, definitely to like hype up his argument, but also to be like, I'm like the rest of them. I don't believe in how people feel. This is bullshit. Like,
yeah.
this is bullshit.
I mean, the majority of women are not like supermodels, and yet the majority of women are married. You know, even overweight
I would also
people
say,
find love. It's crazy in this world of ours. There's entire
I
categories
would
of
also,
porn for overweight individuals: curvy, voluptuous, BBW.
I don't understand why women are held up to the standard when men are not. He doesn't talk about the 30-year-old man, dead written spinster with 25,000, 25, whoa, whoa.
You're ready for a nap.
$250,000 in student loans, making 18 an hour as a social worker gig. Like no one, he didn't talk about the dudes that are doing that. He didn't talk about anybody else doing that.
Yeah, and I think again he's ignoring that it's really fucked up that there are people out there who contemplate offering sexual favors for rent because they can't afford rent, because society doesn't think that social workers are important. And social workers do a lot of things for single fathers, for single men. They do a lot to
Mm-hmm.
prevent these people from taking their own lives or being like abjectly miserable. So the idea that like there's something that only benefits women and thus they shouldn't be paid decent money and should stoop to having to offer barter sexual favors in order to not be homeless is a little fucked up. It's also interesting because again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but like average looking people get married. People who are considered ugly by society standards still often end up married or in relationships. This idea that every single person is holding out for a Jason Momoa Democrat, vegetarian, organic, hippie, sandal wearing, whatever, is like abjectly
That rub
wrong.
their feet.
And I don't want to keep saying this, but it's almost like a fetish with these guys where they keep being like, ugh, I'm not as handsome as Jason Momoa, and that's why women don't like me. It's like, no, because you're an asshole, because you're a piece of shit. But like they get off on this image of being humiliated by like giga chads who women are more attracted to, or they get a sense of superiority by thinking women are too stupid to like recognize there's not more than like five Jason Momoas in the world.
What if it's a kink thing?
I don't know if that's like true for everyone, but I do feel for some people like who feel sexually unsatisfied that it could be a kink thing.
I don't know.
I
That's
mean, you
all I'm
like look
saying.
at, I don't know, like some of the states in the United States with like the longest histories of like racism and brutal oppression of people of color, and then you look at like the types of porn they consume, and a lot of it is like black man has sex with my wife, and you're like, hmm, there's something here. I don't know. I don't like have the brain cells to make that connection
It
explicitly.
can always be tied back to porn. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Ah, yeah. I should note something. So this book came out in February 2023, right, Naomi?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did check. Do you know who the People's Magazine Sexiest Man Alive was in 2022? And I'll give you a hint. It was not Jason Momoa.
Ryan Reynolds.
Ooh, that's a really good guess. It was Chris Evans.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah.
Didn't
So
they just get married or something?
oh, I don't know. But yeah, like he's also completely off base with like how women and maybe gay men measure attractiveness in men. So that's very funny. It plays more into this idea of fantasy rather than like actual reality. Good stuff. I do say that I'm going to go out on a limb. Jason probably does give really good foot rubs. Like that looks like a man who like does like the wrist crunches. He has like the muscles and the strong tendons. He can really get in there. I would love for Jason Momoa to give me a foot rub, and I'm not afraid to be quoted on that. The political psychology of feminism further reinforces this. And since society and men are predisposed to have deference to women, nobody tells them the truth. So we don't tell them, stop majoring in stupid shit. Don't blow so much money on dumb crap. Family and love are more important than your career. Don't get fat, otherwise, you won't find a guy you like. All of this is under your control if you make different decisions. And don't be a promiscuous whore and hurt your ability to find a man who takes you seriously. We don't say this because it would frankly hurt their feelings. To this, I have a very simple question, Naomi. Have men ever questioned your life choices or tried to tell you how to live your life?
Yes. Every day.
Every single day.
Every day. No, I would say the vast majority of people, like when I tell them I'm getting a master's degree, they're like, why would you do that? Like, why don't you like want to just use your bachelor's degree and just like make a family and stuff? Like, usually with a master's degree, you're going to be like working longer hours and like you're going to have like a bigger girl job. And that's not always the case. But I'm like, the vast majority of people, I think, that question it because it's a form of like intimidation in the sense that like if I have a better like if I have a higher degree they're less interested and they're like more intimidated by me.
We've talked about this. Like, the higher form of education a
Yeah,
woman has, the harder it is for her to find a partner who respects
get
her.
married.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But also, I mean, a lot of that has to do with the education gap, where if you're trying to find a partner who's equal in educational attainment to you, it's much harder because more women are getting married than men. I guess unless you're
yeah.
bisexual or lesbian, that simplifies things somewhat. So yeah, I think some of this might occur in like the micro, but it's mostly visible in the macro level of our society. Like every celebrity Twitter or Instagram post is just hundreds of men telling them how to dress, who to record with, how to lose some weight, that they should lose some weight. Women face this in their careers too, whether directly or through things like microaggressions. People tell them they look sick when they don't wear makeup or call out the fact they wore the same outfit 2 days in a row. I also think that Aaron is approaching this like he does his asshole consulting business. Remember, this is a guy who like literally runs a business called Asshole Consulting. And I think he neglects the fact that there is genuine value in being polite. Am I crazy? There is a genuine value in being polite to people and not a huge asshole. People tend to shut down when they feel attacked, and they tend to listen when you come from a place of earnestness. Like, that's business school shit. That's not my personal take. Read a book like Crucial Conversations, where they go over like how to have a difficult conversation with somebody and do so in a way that like no one's feelings get hurt. If you just want to be like blunt and to the point, you're not going to be nearly as successful as people who actually know how to gauge people's feelings and emotions and change the conversation accordingly. Like, the fact you did not go to college is really a bad sign here, bud, because even the most basic business school level classes are like, people have feelings, and if you want to sell people on things, if you want to convince people of things, you have to appeal to that.
You're crazy, you crazy bitch.
I'm a crazy fella. It is true. To be perfectly honest, women are so thoroughly indoctrinated, most women won't listen anyway. And so we are forced to lie further and point to the only other thing that logically, though erroneously, makes sense. It's men. It's the patriarchy. It's toxic masculinity. That 14-year-old boy who hit puberty last week, yeah, he's part of the patriarchy oppressing you, and that's why your life sucks. Not your idiotic decisions. Maintaining this costly and society destroying lie has two effects. First, widespread misandry or hatred of men on the part of women. Since men are the only party who can be blamed for women's failures, society is forced to hold men as the guilty culprit, no matter how misplaced the blame is. Many women believe this lie and resent men for it. Second,
I'm
men.
just really surprised. Hold on, I'm just really surprised that he used a word that big.
Which one?
Misandry.
Oh, all right wing people know misandry. They know what misogyny is, so they
I
have to have a
know, but I'm
word that
just
like
like
contrasts it. They're like, that's not misogyny, that's hatred of men. Ugh.
But he used it.
Second, men being the guilty culprit officially makes women's victims, which provides a reason and rationale to give women preferential treatment under the law at the expense of men. And here, nearly every man alive today is acutely aware of this preferential treatment of women. Employers are blatantly sexist in their preference for hiring and promoting women over men while hiding it behind the guise of affirmative action. As a result, women are given preferential treatment in government contracts, grants, employment, and welfare. Side note here, I really feel like he lost out on a job to a woman at some point in his career and was like, it must have been because she was a woman and not because I'm a huge asshole who's branded myself as a huge asshole and disagreeable and willing to say uncomfortable truths in the moment. I feel employers have the right to discriminate against people who they think are going to make their work environment progressively more toxic. Like, I would like to work with people who, aren't going to make my life miserable. That's my preference. I don't know. So he
You're
does have some
crazy.
stats. He does have some stats, Naomi. I don't want to pretend as he didn't provide evidence. He says laws are passed forcing companies to put a quota of women on their boards and executive staffs. So this is from an article from EURACTIV.com. It is titled EU Parliament Passes Directive on Gender Quotas for Corporate Boards. So this is something that happened last year, November 22nd, 2022. It's written by Celia Kern. And it says pretty much what he's talking about. That said, this is the European Union, a little more progressive of a place than the United States, and it's a little more complicated than he makes it out to be. So the article says the European Parliament gave its final approval on Tuesday, November 22nd, to a law that would implement quotas to balance gender balance on corporate boards across the bloc. The Women on Boards Directive, first proposed by the European Commission 10 years ago, focuses on publicly traded companies. It implements quotas on the proportion of board seats filed by the underrepresented sex, 40% for only non executive seats, or 33% for both non executive and executive board positions. Companies will have to comply by 2026. What do we think?
I would just say exactly what you said. Like, the EU is a lot more of a progressive place than the United States is. So
Not
he's
perfect.
literally
But
just.
by no means are we calling the EU perfect. They
No.
struggle with all sorts of things. But
No. Yeah.
notice how it's the underrepresented sex. This is not a make work program for women. In the status quo, it might be, but there are a lot of places like Sweden where women actually outnumber men in a lot of places like government and business. So this is simply saying you should have corporate boards that have 40% of whatever sex is not overly represented in business. So if anything, if what he's saying is true,
Yeah.
that women have this disproportionate advantage in society, then this is actually good for men because now men aren't going to get passed over. At least 40% of all these women-led companies, which I couldn't find any, but they must exist because he says they exist, must now have men on the boards, right? So all this is doing is hey, maybe it's important to have gender equality, and this might help balance stuff out. But then it's also you know, the EU is doing okay financially. The member states are not falling to pieces, and UK is a really good example of a country that decided to pull out and now their economy is in pieces. I'm not saying look to the EU to guide all of your financial decisions because they've made some boneheaded moves recently, but also if you want to make money, maybe go with the block of governments that isn't going bankrupt and cutting social services left and right. That feels like a good bet for the long term. I don't know.
You're crazy.
I'm,
You're
you just
crazy.
keep
You just
saying
keep
that.
saying crazy
I'm
things.
gonna put you on I'm gonna record you and just do an episode by myself and just play that every 5 minutes. Yeah. I guess I should also mention I don't really think this is any more crazy than governments mandating lunch breaks or 40-hour weeks or weekends off or OSHA safety compliance. Forcing businesses to serve a social need and not just bleed the planet dry, in my mind, is actually kind of a good thing. The problem I think a lot of these women in positions are going to face is that many are going to presume they're not qualified to serve on these boards. And so they're probably going to get shit from people who are you just got this job to meet some arbitrary quota, which probably isn't going
Yep.
to be true. But yeah, best of luck for the people who have to fill positions in order to meet quotas in these businesses. He also mentions that there's multiple times more women only scholarships compared to men, and he provides multiple citations supporting this. I don't really know what point he's trying to make with that. I don't think he's supporting the idea that private schools should abide by strict government rules and procedures. He's made it pretty clear he's a libertarian in both this and other writings he's done. So it's almost like he says they should abide by very strict government regulations, which would then imply to me that, like, businesses in general should imply by strict government regulations, like mandating 40% of your board be a certain way. So he can't really have it both ways. You can't say that private institutions have a right to do specific stuff and then also say private businesses should not have a right to do things that I don't like, namely giving women money. Um, I guess he's trying to say that a gender imbalance in scholarships is indicative of a larger societal issue, but these scholarships probably exist because private donors realize how difficult women have it in certain career tracks and are trying to encourage them to stay the course. Or it's universities trying to balance the gender of heavily segregated programs. We've discussed this already, how like women who want the same things as men out of their education, like high paying jobs and like specific fields of study, tend to be directed into lower paying career tracks. And this is like one of the ways you push women back into specific career tracks and try to balance out to some degree their career opportunities. And for someone who's like so adamant that women aren't doing enough to get the proper degrees, don't you want to incentivize women to get the right degrees? Don't you want to make it easier for women to get the right degrees?
I'm gonna say, because you know what I'm gonna say.
That's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, but honestly, I have a solution that he's not going to like, and that if you really don't like the idea that there are more women-only scholarships compared to men-only scholarships, why don't we just make college free? There wouldn't be any gender segregation in college if college was free. There would be no one who like benefited more than the opposite sex if college was
Joel,
free. This solves so many
we
problems.
could not do that because we live in a society that these people, this group of misogynistic assholes, like, because we live in a capitalistic society. If we started to make things free, everything would have to be free now. And then we live in a communist, like, piece of shit socialist society. I'm just gonna add on in all of these, like, these these red flag words that they like to throw around just for funsies, you know? And so they don't want to do that. You crazy.
I think my greater point is not like, gotcha, contradiction, you're wrong. It's to say that, like, a lot of libertarians are not intellectually consistent. They say they want, like, freedom from government regulation, but really what they mean is they want the freedom to do whatever the hell they like, and anything that people do that is an expression of freedom they don't like, they want the government to control. And so it's like a mix of like freedom and authoritarianism. And I think that's really important to understand when people who are like, I want you to be free, also harbor like really horrible beliefs about like gay people not being allowed to marry. It's not that they want all people to be free, it's that they want themselves and people like them to be free to do whatever they want. And often that involves like discriminating against marginalized peoples. I don't know. Now, he does bring up a really interesting point here, and I wanted to talk about this a little more in detail, and that is about custody arrangements when divorces occur. Naomi, have you heard this argument before that like family courts give disproportionate um, uh, courts disproportionately award full custody to women over men? Because I've read a lot from like men's rights groups online. This is one of like the biggest things they argue proves that like society is biased against men. That fathers who are just trying to like spend time with their kids in nasty, nasty divorces don't have the same opportunities to spend time with their kids as women do.
You know why I've heard that? I've heard that because the vast majority of the time, when a woman's lawyer in the courtroom is asking the man when the last time he went to the doctor with his kids was, or what size shoe his kids wear, they don't have any idea what the fuck the lawyer is talking about. And so the reason why the woman is awarded full custody is because she is the main provider for the kids. She is the main person that takes care of them. And so why would you give custody to somebody who doesn't take care of their own kids? and doesn't know how to take care of their own
Well,
kids.
that can't be true because women just get children. They just pop out children so they can have a fancy accessory like a handbag. He said that already.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
And
Sorry.
men, it's good that men don't know anything about their kids because like that gives them an opportunity to connect with their kids, right? Like, divorces can pull families apart, but if you have the opportunity to like sit down and be like, "What's your shoe size? You got any major allergies I should be aware of? When's your birthday?" Like those are opportunities to bond. And the fact that women can't do this with their kids proves that they're bad mothers who won't be able to survive a nasty divorce. I'm just saying. But
You're
yeah,
right.
this is an argument that a lot of men's rights groups talk about. And I think there are certain instances where you can cherry pick and say this, really horrible custody instance happened. It was really unfair and like potentially we should reevaluate it. But on the whole, I don't think the evidence supports what he's saying. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. So the evidence he cites here is family courts award custody to mothers at 5 times the rates of fathers. And it's an article from the blog daddygotcustody.com.
Ew.
The question I have for you, Naomi, before we get into this is what percentage of fathers fight for full custody? What percentage of fathers are trying to get full custody of their kids?
I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna say 25%.
Whoa, damn, you're a hater. You don't think men fight for custody tooth and nail? You don't think they're out there in the
I'm saying
trenches
full
every
custody.
day? 25%
I'm
full
saying full
custody.
custody.
Okay, no, that's fair. You're right. Partial custody is probably more common. So, the Washington Post in August of 1994 had an article by Marian Henriquez Nuedo. She was a longtime practitioner of divorce law in Cook County. And this was, I think, an affiliate piece from the Chicago Tribune. So, the article is titled, "Do You Think Mothers Automatically Get Custody? Think Again." Much of the shock at the recent Ireland Smith custody decision in Michigan, in which a woman lost custody of her daughter for going to college and putting the child in daycare, stems from sheer astonishment. Don't mothers have an automatic advantage in custody cases? People asked. Certainly, men's rights groups have repeatedly made that claim. It seems obvious enough given that more than 90% of the children of divorced and single parents live with their mothers. But there's more to that statistic that meets the eye. Most divorcing or single fathers, roughly 90%, never ask for custody. In contested divorce and parentage custody cases, however, the father wins 60% of the time. So you said men only ask for full custody 25% of the time. Men only ask for custody, partial or full, 10% of the time. It's much, much worse. Now I recognize I am willing to wholly concede that like this is an out of date article. The problem is I can't find any more stats that are more recent than this. All the stats I find reference something similar to this study. They're all like men incredibly rarely ask for full custody. And so I'm willing to admit that like there's new updated evidence, but like it's just not out there. If someone wants to present something, more than willing to look at it. The Ireland Smith case is not a fluke. There is no automatic advantage for mothers. In fact, there's an edge for fathers. Where does it come from? Some of that 60% is accounted for by the fact that fathers are most likely to seek custody when the father is egregiously unfit or dysfunctional. Many of the other cases result from the mother's financial inability to support the child. Of course, that often is closely related to the father's failure to pay support. So that's like a messed up thing where the father's like, this woman is unable to provide for my child. And it's like, yeah, because you made her stay at home and she like doesn't have any experience working a career. So she can probably only get minimum wage jobs. So unless you're providing support of some kind, yes, she would probably be unable to support the kid. But you don't want to provide support. You just want to have the kid to yourself like a fancy handbag. Um, Now, paternal demands for custody are most likely to arise when the mother demands child support or more child support, as in the Ireland case, or when the father gets married, thereby acquiring either full time unpaid childcare or second income. The rest of the cases? One commentator from the Women's Legal Defense Fund says the judicial standard applied when custody is contested often comes down to this: a woman who does less than everything for her child is a terrible mother. A man who does more than nothing is a wonderful father. The double standard expresses itself in some strange and contradictory ways. The following rationales for depriving a mother of custody are drawn from my own experience and personal knowledge in 17 years of practicing divorce law. The mother was abused as a child and is therefore more likely to abuse her children. The mother has a male paramour living in the home. The mother has a brother living in the home. The mother has no male living in the home and therefore cannot provide a role model for her sons. The mother works nights. The mother works as a go go dancer. The mother does not work. The mother takes the children to a roller rink for recreation. And my personal favorite, the mother leaves the children unattended. On further inquiry, this was elaborated to she sleeps late on Sunday mornings, leaving the 3 and 5-year-old children unsupervised. On still further inquiry as to the meaning of late, that turns out to mean 8 a.m. Do you get that? Mother is unfit because she sleeps till 8 o'clock Sunday mornings. In fairness, let me cite my favorite DCFS ruling denying custody to a father, because during visitation he fed the children junk food. It turns out the Department of Children and Family Services required visitation to take place at the DCFS office building, where the only available food was the junk in the vending machines. In short, custody cases are being made the dumping grounds for all the old prejudices we would never allow into the more respectable forums. It is time we formulated clear, rational standards for good parenting. Good parents are entitled to rely on having met those standards to fight off frivolous or malicious challenges to their custody. Children whose parents are not living together are entitled to grow up in a stable environment, not yanked back and forth by irrational demands and capricious judgments. Our families deserve better. Now, again, I'm willing to admit that this article is super dated. I'm more than willing to concede that things may have changed. But given how little our culture seems to think men like kids and how much our culture seems to value male autonomy, I don't think it's a surprise that men might not be too inclined to raise their kids. And that's supported by evidence, too. So the Huffington Post had an article written by Kathy Mayer, a marriage educator and divorce coach, in July of 2012. It was titled Dispelling the Myth of Gender Bias in the Family Court System. So this goes over differences in the family court system and outcomes, and it notes that of married fathers, according to the report, a married father spends on average 6.5 hours a week taking care of primary child care activities with his children. The married mother, on the other hand, spends an average of 12.9 hours. Since two-income households are now the norm, not the exception, the above information indicates that not only are mothers working, but they're also doing twice as much childcare as fathers. It only makes sense that mothers who have a closer bond due to the time spent caring for a child should be the one more likely to retain primary custody after divorce. So that feeds into exactly what you're saying, right? Where it's women fundamentally understand their kid, they know a lot about their child, they can prove that they've spent more time and probably done more parenting to their kid. But it also reinforces something we've talked about in pretty much every single episode of this, which is women do more work around the house, and that causes resentment that's more likely to lead to divorce, that causes problems that lead to therapy, that causes women to less desire sex and sleeping with their partners, right? It's really the root of so much of this. So for married fathers, they spend half as much time as married mothers. For divorced or unwed fathers, the stats are a little bit different. More startling are the stats on absent fathers, or the amount of time fathers spend with children once a divorce is final. According to the above study, when fathers and children live separately, 22% of fathers see their children more than once a week. 29% of fathers see their children 1 to 4 times a month. The most disturbing fact of all is that 27% of fathers have no contact with their children at all. When you take into consideration that mothers spend more time taking care of children before divorce, and only 22% of fathers take advantage of spending quality time with their children after the divorce, the fact that more mothers retain custody seems downright reasonable, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
It does.
Oh,
It does. I didn't know if that was rhetorical or not. Sometimes you ask me rhetorical questions and you just keep going.
do I?
If I start speaking, are you gonna interrupt me and
No.
keep going?
But Naomi, here's the clincher. Here's the thing that the little cherry on top. Let's presume that all courts are horribly biased against men. Okay?
Okay.
Are the majority of child custody arrangements decided in courts?
I'm gonna say no.
Damn. Yeah, I've done this too often. You kind of have a feeling of where it's going. Yeah,
No.
that's
I
accurate.
just know because I have a lot of friends. Like when I was younger, a lot of my friends' parents were getting divorced, and a lot of them just would get the not go to court, but the negotiation. What do you call that? What do you call that? Before
Custody
they get to court?
hearings?
Sure, we'll call it that.
Yeah, I don't know enough of the terminology because I have parents who are happily married Boom. Suck it, children of divorce.
Did you have a lot of yeah, did you have a lot of friends when you were younger that got divorced, like their parents got
I can
divorced?
only think of one off the top of my head. It's possible there are more, but only one like brought it up and mentioned it. So maybe. But also suck it, children of divorced parents. I'm gonna keep saying that. That's my new catchphrase.
I would I would say that like 90% of my friends when I was in middle school had parents that were
Oh my
divorced.
god, Chandler,
Yeah.
Arizona, man.
Yeah.
Chandler, Arizona.
No, it was more it was Gilbert. They all lived in Gilbert. Maybe that was the factor.
Oh, okay. So yes, Naomi, you did not fall for my clever ploy. The majority of child custody cases are not decided by the courts. So even if every single court on the planet is horribly biased against men, that doesn't matter. According to divorcepeers.com, in 51% of custody cases, both parents agreed on their own that mom would become the custodial parent. In 29% of custody cases, the decision was made without any third party involvement. In 11%, the decision for mom to have custody was made during mediation. In 5%, the
Mediation.
no, there we go. Yes. In 5%, the issue was resolved after a custody evaluation. Only 4% of custody cases went to trial. And of that 4%, only 1.5% completed custody litigation. So 91% of child custody after divorce is decided with no interference from the family court system. Fewer than 4% of custody decisions are made by a family court. So these statistics tell us four things. Fathers are less involved in the children's care during marriage. Fathers are less involved in the children's lives after divorce. Mothers gain custody because the vast majority of fathers choose to give them custody. And there is no family court bias in favor of mothers because very few fathers seek custody during divorce. I don't know. The evidence seems pretty clear on that one.
I heard a statistic recently by the Gutenmacher Institute. Did I say that correct?
Yeah,
That apparently the like millennial generation spends 4 times as much time with their kids than the generation before them.
that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, especially reading these statistics. But I think these statistics are kind of more like a mixture of boomer and millennial men. But I don't know. I just like
The standards of what constitutes a good woman, good parent. Boy, real Freudian slip right there. A good parent these days seems so much higher than they were in the past, right? Because like in the past, it was sure go let your kids run around in the neighborhood until after dark. And now it's like you
yeah.
need to be meticulously planning activities for your kid. You need to send them to like mathletes practice after school every day so that they get into a good college. You need to be drilling them with like Spanish vocabulary cards in the car on the way to school. You need to be actively involved with their lives. And that's such a high standard, right?
I just love this new trend on social media where they're talking about like how like you know that weird situation that goes on where it's like, oh, it's classy if you're rich to drink at like 11 a.m., but you're like an alcoholic if you drink at 11 a.m. and you're poor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those types of situations. And so it's like these people getting like looking at TikTok videos of like these organic moms or these like Montessori moms, and the Montessori moms are like, oh well, I got rid of my child's bed frame because like I just thought that it'd be better if they slept on a floor mat.
Yeah.
And the people were like, oh well, if she was like living in, you know, the projects in New York or something, she would have her kids taken away by CPS yesterday, kind of thing. So it's just interesting to see like that weird, you know, situation going on social media right now. I feel like that plays a big role.
Yeah, I saw one tweet that I thought was indicative of that. I think it was about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's daughter, Lilibet. But it
Yeah.
was some fancy magazine being like, their daughter Lilibet already speaks 2 languages at 2 years old. And someone pointed out, you know, the children of most immigrant families are able to do that, but no one's like showering them with praise, right? Like a lot of immigrant kids speak both English and Chinese or Spanish or whatever their parents speak at home. So the idea that like this royal daughter is able to do it should not be treated as like indicative of her intelligence or worthy to inherit the crown at some point.
I'm
Yeah.
just white and honky, okay? I only know one language.
White and Honky is Naomi's parody of Weird Al's song White and Nerdy, which was itself a parody of another
Yeah.
song, which honestly, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I don't know what it is either.
So Aaron does go on because he really wants to clinch this argument. He says alimony is awarded to women in 97% of cases. Um, Now, this is meant to indicate both that the court system is heavily biased against men and that like women are too privileged because they get all this stuff. Unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than what he says. If women are expected to stay at home, it seems unlikely they have any serious assets. If they also work, the likelihood is very high they make less than their husband. I know he doesn't like the concept of divorce, but he wants the kids, which are the fathers, not some other persons, to be taken care of, and for the woman to not leech off the government, because that's also bad. This seems like a really good deal. But I'm not just going to dismiss the link he provides out of hand. Let's take a look at that. So the link is Gender and Alimony. Who gets it? Who pays it? What's changing on the marcylaw.com blog. I guess Marcy Law is an alimony lawyer in Orlando. It says, today it is far less common for anybody, male or female, to receive alimony after divorce than it was in the past. In the 1960s, 25% of divorce settlements included alimony orders. Now that figure is closer to 10%. Women are still the primary alimony recipients, but the number of men who receive alimony from their former spouses is increasing. According to the 2000 census, 0.5% of alimony recipients in the United States were male. By 2010, 3% of the 400,000 alimony recipients in the country were male. So in 10 years, it increased 6 times. So alimony is not.
Can we go over the reason for alimony? Is alimony just because, like, oh, you can't, like, live on your, like, you can't
I think that's it.
produce
Yeah.
enough money for. Okay.
So to sum up, his own source is saying alimony is not awarded in 97% of divorce cases. It's awarded in 10% of cases. In cases where alimony was awarded, there's a clear gender skew, but in only a decade, the percentage went up 6 times. He's actively misinterpreting his own source once again. Women get alimony in 9.7% of all divorce cases. It seems likely that more than 10% of women have less assets than their partner, but like, I'm not going to look that up. I think that's pretty obvious. Clearly, he doesn't care, otherwise, he would have substantiated it. Naomi, we're getting really close. We are finishing this chapter today. You are so excited. Then we get into chapter 7 where things go off the rails. Okay, so he has to put a cherry on top of this like dog poop sundae that he has constructed. He runs the worst ice cream shop in the world, right? He runs asshole ice cream. He's like, we got dog poop, we got horse poop, we got giraffe poop. I think we got some boogers in the back if you need something to sprinkle on top. Yeah, he doesn't know how to run a business. So he also says women get lower standards in a whole host of employment or educational opportunities. So he says women get lower standards in a whole host of employment or educational opportunities. And I think that's interesting because in most testing I've seen, women get scores that are like better or the same as men, and in most categories are like rapidly creeping up to wherever men are. I pulled some stats from bestcolleges.com about average SAT scores. I'm not saying SAT scores are like indicative of overall skill sets or knowledge, but it is a way to compare different populations. So women's total average SAT score was 1043. Men's average was 1056. There's really not a difference between those two, right? 1043 out of 1600 versus 1056 out of 1600. There's statistically no difference between the two. So like this idea that women have lower standards is like not really borne out by the data. If women have lower standards, men also would by default have lower standards because like I don't know, 1056 out of 1600 is not particularly impressive. Call me crazy. College and universities, he says, make it painfully clear they prefer women over men. And this says nothing of the constant nauseous celebration of women at every crack, crevice, and opportunity in society. Media, commercials, the schools, company-sponsored women's empowerment conferences, pink ribbons, the movies, or billboards, women are revered and celebrated ad nauseum to the point that merely being born female is somehow worthy of praise, if not worship. damn, how many gods are female? Can you think of any like commonly worshipped gods that are women? Beyond besides Beyonce. I don't I mean we all were thinking Beyonce, but
There's Ganesh, right?
is Ganesh I don't
It's
think
like a
Ganesh is a
Hindu.
woman. Are you thinking of
I
Shiva?
thought Ganesh was a
Ganesh is the big
maybe.
elephant.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being sexist. Maybe that's a female elephant.
Shiva god.
But to my point, I don't think women are quote unquote worshipped in most segments of our society. Um, I think it's an interesting argument potentially about how men don't have the support and affection that women do in our society. But that's also not what he's saying. And also, we kind of do support men. Men being average in most instances is seen as fine and not worthy of comment, but women who are average are considered subpar and needing improvement. Like, men's commercials are, you're a decent dude, but also, it would be so cool if you had a truck. And women's commercials are all like, you're falling apart, and in order to attract anyone, you need to purchase these 16 beauty products. I think
You can dance while you're on your period. Here's a tampon.
you know, ladies, you're getting a little chunky. Have you considered eating yogurt every day for breakfast? That would definitely solve your problems and not flame up your IBS. Brilliant. So, yeah, like, I'm not saying commercials are necessarily indicative of society at large, but it certainly is interesting that all of the marketing we have is kind of directed to support that idea. Food for thought. I guess I'm really just thinking there's a British comedy group called Mitchell and Webb who had this really good example, and if I can find the clip, I'll put it in here, of men and women being treated completely differently in the realm of advertising.
Ow! My stomach.
Do you suffer from gut agony?
And my head.
Tension head? Got that bloated feeling?
Oh.
Inevitable wrinkles? The beginnings of lady moustache? And now you've pissed yourself again? Women, you're leaking, aging, hairy, overweight, and everything hurts. And your children's clothes are filthy. No wonder men long for other, less clammy women. For God's sake, sort yourself out.
Now I'm free to live my own life, my way.
Men, shave and get drunk. Because you're already brilliant.
So he does wrap it up. And he says, what adds insult to injury is when women still can't make it with all these incredible advantages. They still somehow blame it on men or the patriarchy. In spite of having every possible advantage given to them in life, the reason they make less or can't afford daycare isn't the choices they made, but because all men are consciously or unconsciously sexist and oppressing women, which is truly insulting and offensive to men everywhere. When accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. He said it. He said the thing, Naomi, but he used it to support men. It's great. I love it. I mean, this, I guess, ties back to the whole idea of the 14 points of fascism we've discussed in a prior episode, where it's like men kind of have control over every element of society. So if he's trying to argue that, like, women are actually the ones in control, he needs to flip it around and make men the victim. They're both all powerful and could beat women if they push back, but they're also so weak that they couldn't achieve any of this. It's this wonderful intellectual contradiction, which once you see it, you can't unsee it in conservative politics. Admittedly, all the above is a lengthy though necessary way to explain that women deserve less. He said it! He said the thing! With affirmative action, preferential treatment, both by law and tradition, and our societal worship of women, society is already giving women every possible advantage over men. Therefore, you do not give women even more preferential treatment in your personal lives. And though you're biologically predisposed to want to help women, either out of simple kindness or sexual interest, you should never give women preferential treatment at your expense. You never bail a woman out of her student loans. You never help a single mom pay her rent because you already paid the taxes on that. You never give preferential hiring treatment to a girl over a guy because you want to fuck her. And you never do a girl's homework, auto repairs, carpentry, or computer repairs uncompensated financially. If women cannot make it on their own with all the advantages society has afforded them, you can't help them. Women deserve less. We
Period
made it.
queen.
We made it. We made it. Chapter 6. It's
Okay,
done.
let me read. Let me do it. Let me do the thing.
You want to do the recap?
Can I read it? Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about what we
You read
learned in
this
chapter
entire
6.
episode. In this one, Aaron/Myron try to prove that women aren't upholding their part in the new contract by showing that women don't do nearly as worthwhile jobs as their male counterparts. There's a lot to cover, including analogies about historical events that are completely divorced from reality. The bold claim that men cannot live without sex, our takedown of both Aaron's relationship rules and the Law of Powers. I totally forgot that we went over that. And the first part of a multi-pronged attack against the idea that men were solely responsible for the development and the maintenance of society up until the modern era. We then get into why using the gender breakdown of college majors is a horrible way to track the actual jobs people end up with. Why majoring in useful fields of study might not be the best way to make money or help society. Why both sexes are directed into different major paths, even if they have identical interests. Why the top 10 jobs for women are actually pretty important for society, and why there are serious barriers for women trying to get into the career paths he thinks are integral for human civilization. And why using FMLA and vacation leave rates are litmus tests for women's interest in careers is one of the stupid. Oh, I thought that was going to say stupidest. Is one of the stupider things he said. In this episode, we wrap up with just a bunch of random just a bunch of random complaints he has for society, ranging from women driving up government spending, not supported by evidence, to women not caring at all for men, just wanting to wanting to just extract resources from them, not supported by evidence or logic, and women getting preference in divorces, not supported by evidence. He says a lot of shit about society that can probably just be blamed on greed and capitalism rather than either gender, but puts it at the feet of women. Women are the only thing wrong with Western civilization, and we'd be better off, per him, if they were dead. Okay, he didn't say that. He says we shouldn't give women any more resources after they've already squandered what we've given them, which seems more innocuous, but also has an insidious side. We'll get into in the next 2 chapters. Naomi, we're picking up speed. We're gonna wrap this up in 2 to 3 episodes.
Boy, add some emotion. That was so monotone. You were just an emotionless robot right there. What, too tired of taking care of the kids all day?
No, I'm just too tired of fighting my legal battles and letting men get away with all of the custody that they want.
Yeah. Boy, this is a fun guy. He clearly has some good opinions. He seems like someone you'd want to invite to your parties because he definitely wouldn't start fights and trying to sleep with all of your friends. Do you think this guy gets invited to parties? He seems like a bit much even at like right-wing leaning parties. Because he'd be...
I feel like he throws the parties and people just go to them because he has the best liquor.
Ooh, that's an interesting thought. Because he feels like someone who like goes to parties and starts hitting on people's girlfriends, and he knows that they're like engaged or married, involved with other people, and he's just like, yeah.
And he's already married.
I don't think so.
So he's
no.
I think so.
I've done a little bit of reading. I don't think he said anything about being married at any point in the past. It's possible, but yeah, Aaron is he's a lone spirit. He's someone who does best with just his motorcycle and like a little bindle on a stick and going off into the wilderness, finding himself, soul searching, selling horrible asshole advice to major Fortune 500 companies. He's got it all.
I think that we can blame this entire Red Pill movement on one movie and one movie alone. And you know what that movie is?
Sharknado.
Wolf on Wall Street.
When did that come out? Was that like 2012?
That came out... Yeah, something like that. It came out a while
2013. Oh my god. He started his Captain Capitalism blog in 2015, I think. At least that's where the article was from. I think he's been around longer, but no, you're right. A lot of, oh God, yeah. You were joking, and now I'm like, oh, there's something to
No,
that.
I was completely serious. That was the sad part. Because literally the worst part about being single, like a single woman, is like when a man goes to his TV and he's like, oh, let's watch something. You know what I mean? It's always the
Oh
same movie. It is
no!
always Wolf on Wall Street. He's like, there's this really great movie. It's like really underground. And I'm like, please don't do it. Please don't do it. Please don't do it.
I don't recall the exact details of this. I want to say on Twitter a while back, I saw someone who mentioned that they were like friends with Martin Scorsese's daughter. Fuck, who did this? Was it Martin Scorsese?
Mhm.
Yes, Martin Scorsese did Wolf of Wall Street,
I don't
and
know.
they were like, "Yeah, I was over at like his house right after the movie came out, and I was talking to him, and he was like." Do people of your generation actually like look up to the characters in this film? Do they understand it's not like a cautionary, it's supposed to be a cautionary tale, it's not an ideal lifestyle? And she was like, yeah, all the people of my age love this fucking film. It's so cool. You're like the coolest dude. How could you, not understand you made all these people look amazing and awe-inspiring? And the problem is, like, even if your characters are huge pieces of shit, A, the average American does not have amazing media literacy. And B, they're huge pieces of shit who are also fabulously wealthy and they get to do whatever they want. Like, that's such like an American dream right there. It doesn't matter if their lives are falling apart. They have enough money to be completely divorced from the consequences of their actions. And that's one of the things in the film. It's like the end of the film specifically has Jordan Belfort, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, being like, I thought I was going to go to prison, but then I remembered I was rich. And the film is like kind of a critique of capitalism in that regard, where it's like, yeah, this person who's like obviously horrible, who's done all these like very obvious crimes, gets to get away with it because of the system we've created. But a lot of other people look at that and they're like, oh my God, I can be whatever I want to be. I can escape all consequences if I have money. Oh, you're so right. Oh, damn. Naomi, do we need to review The Wolf of Wall Street on this podcast?
No, I'm not watching that one more time.
No. I don't even know if you need to necessarily watch it. I think it's more of digging point by point into like all the terrible messages. Where if someone takes you home and wants to watch that movie and like is interested in like the characters unironically, you should probably break up with them.
You know, the best part of that film was, of course, Jonah Hill. But now I can't say that because Jonah Hill's a piece of shit.
Hollywood is a great place. If we've learned anything, Hollywood has no problems. There are no consequences for
I'm not
what
even
you
gonna touch. I'm not even gonna touch on the whole like issue about that guy from that '70s show and Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher coming forward and be like, "Well, he wasn't a bad guy to us," and it's like, bitch, you guys literally funded nonprofits that are all about like anti-sex trafficking and like being nice to women, and now you're pulling up with this shit, and I'm just like,
No.
stop it.
No, if you dig into
bitches.
their like nonprofits, it's one of those things where it's like, again, harkens back to the sex worker book, Revolting Prostitutes, we read in like episode 6 or whatever. And one of the big points they make is a lot of people will go out and pursue sex work on their own. That doesn't necessarily mean that they like it. It's just that they're financially obligated to do this because it's one of the best ways to quickly make money. And you have like some discretion over like your safety if you're like webcamming or whatever. And one of the big issues with Ashton Kutcher's nonprofit is it assumes that all people involved in sex work are doing so non-consensually. And so it criminalizes all of their activity and treats them all as victims while ignoring the like material conditions that like force a lot of people into this. That's not to say they haven't done some good work in like stopping child prostitution rings or whatever. But like you got to be really critical of like these rings that ignore the reality and just kind of like slut shame people who are forced to do this because the economy is deeply fucked up because all the wealth is concentrated among people who, earn residuals from doing the '70s show or whatever. That's just an example. Yeah, so I don't know if it's like morally inconsistent. They have this Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis they might do work for this charity, but this charity is like only people of a certain class will do this thing. Certain people don't deserve repercussions for their actions because they're in a better class of people. Which, is unfortunately how a lot of people see the world.
Joel, I'd like to wrap up this episode so that our audience can get back to their regular scheduled content of the next episode, which will probably be the same content, but episode 7. I mean, chapter 7, because we're definitely on like episode 95.
Episode 95. This is our podcast. We should just do it on a podcast where every week we read like 2 lines and then dissect everything wrong with those 2 lines.
I feel like you would have a heyday doing that, and I would love to do that, but I don't have the patience to sit here and have you dissect every single line.
It's like bibliomancy. You know, you like open the Bible and like find a random passage and draw inspiration from it. I open this book and find a random passage and I'm like, my hatred of men's rights is coursing through me. And then I do great things. I mostly punch holes in the wall. King. Yeah. I don't really know how to wrap this up. We're so bad at exits. We need to talk at some point about how to like finish podcasts. I think we should do like a riddle or something from a children's book of knock-knock jokes.
Just let me do it. 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 Audience, have a great week. Wear a condom. Get tested, please. And if you have chlamydia, make sure that you tell your tattoo artist. We love you. Have a great week.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at DateTheseGuys or visit datetheseguys.org. If you have questions for the podcast or want to be a wealthy sugar parent, please send an email to datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our work, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/datetheseguys. We have behind-the-scenes information, early episode access, participation in polls, and exclusive access to a guy sibling map of date ideas for the Arizona area. Since the world sucks right now, we are currently donating all Patreon proceeds to trans organizations like the Trevor Project, a trans suicide prevention organization, and moving assistance funds for those fleeing states outlawing their very existence. Please consider becoming a member and supporting our work today.